So, hi everyone. I'm here with Zandra Moore and Charlie Bartle from Zygens, and you guys are in the sort of like the AI kind of training and development kind of space. So, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Lovely to be here, Chris.
So obviously this is a new and supposed to developing kind of space, really. I mean, and I know you spend time actually in companies sort of talking around AI and sort of the state of development in terms of AI and what kind of to do. What are you kind of finding, I suppose, in terms of like where companies are in terms of their thinking around AI? I mean, we've all talked about it a lot, but where are people when you're sort of seeing it kind of on the ground?
Do you know what? The first thing that we find is people are worried about being behind the curve. They're usually asking as whether or not they're doing enough or what they could be doing. So there's a lot of people worried about how fast they should be going and what their peer groups are doing. But often people are doing, some of the basics like playing around with tools, Copilot and what have you, with a different degree of kind of competence across the organisation. Those people that are curious will be having a go, and there's a lot of people that have never even pressed the button inside Copilot. But I'd say there's a lot of organisations with tools and a lot of people don't really know what to do with them at the moment. But senior leadership teams and C-suites wondering about how best to kind of lean into this at the moment. So lots of similar themes across most businesses we work with at the moment, which is a fear of not doing it fast enough and a healthy amount of curiosity, I would say. So.
I mean, obviously, like some of the AI models, I suppose, modeling itself has been around for a long time. I mean, but I know there's been sort of like this wave that's kind of come through with ChatGPT and the various chat models that have kind of come through. I mean, how much do you think people actually understand? I suppose, do they think it's just magic, or is this something that new can really be used? I mean, we sort of get lulled into this false sense of security, don't we? A little bit, where we just sort of like, I can do things at home, but then doing that in the office in a different kind of environment can be often a bit of a challenge.
I think there's quite a big misconception still at the moment on what's actually possible. So I think there's a huge mix, obviously, of how people are using it. But I'm finding there's quite a lot of people that use it, and they might use it in the personal life and have the apps on their phone, and they find that pretty powerful. They'll attempt to do that at work, and then it won't do what they want it to do because of how they prompted it, for example. And then some people are going, oh, it's no good. It can't do what I want it to do. And there's a huge gap of education that's missing for people to see what the potential is. So I'd say that's probably quite a common sort of trend across the board, with people sort of using it, dabbling at home and then at work if they haven't had access to that learning.
It's like sorry, Chris. It's like the tech adoption. The tech adoption curve. And you've got the kind of early adopters and the late adopters and the laggards, and you just see that across every business. You have the ones that are, have really had a go and had a play and self-educated and gone and watched the YouTube videos, through to those that have never even touched a tool or a model. And, we're right in the middle of that kind of early adoption cycle where there's a big gap between those that have had a go and those that haven't. Yeah.
So I remember back in the early days of HTML, right? You remember back within websites, and it was like, and we could all do it, but then it kind of accelerated, and the world kind of split into the people who could do cascading style sheets and those that couldn't, and sort of like as we sort of like evolved, and it sort of left some of us behind. Do you think we're at risk of that, I suppose, with AI? And is that a fear? Is that something we should try and keep up with? I mean, what's the important piece particularly for execs?
I think this is every tech wave. There's the same sort of pattern. You've got those that lean in and the early adopters, and you'll always have some people that do get left behind for whatever reason. And I think what's important is the difference between this tech wave and others is the pace of it. So the potential to leave a huge amount of people behind very quickly. So that gap between those that know about it and those that don't has grown in a speed that I've never seen before. And the challenge for execs in that is it's hard for the execs to know where to apply this technology effectively and do that safely, because they don't have enough people in their organisation with the competence to do that and the skills to do that. They don't have that. Hasn't been the time for their existing teams to really catch up because of the pace of it. So, usually there's enough early adopters in an organisation to be the champions, the custodians, the curators of how to apply that technology. But I just think it's moved so fast that a lot of organisations are feeling like they don't have the skills to do it, and that's the challenge of this particular cycle. There's probably not enough early adopters with deep knowledge at the moment. So,
I mean, a lot of people, when I'm talking to people in the industry, I mean, a lot of people are talking about or searching for use cases, right? So where are the use cases? What can I use this for? Those kind of things. I mean, what are some of the challenges people have around finding those use cases? And then also, what are some of the areas where you think, well, this is where it really can be used? Because sometimes the reality can be a little bit different from the hype to a certain extent, certainly in all the tech cycles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the pressure for execs to learn this stuff is definitely there because of the amount of noise, I guess, that there is all over LinkedIn and all over the media. But actually knowing where to start is the biggest challenge, because there are so many opportunities, there's so many use cases in every single business, that actually being able to identify an opportunity isn't the problem, but actually how do you know that's the right place to start and actually make these things happen? That's what we're hearing from the execs, and I'd say sort of, at CEO level, they're getting more involved in this than any sort of tech change has over the decades, I guess, because of the amount of impact that it's having on the overall business and not just in one particular part, which might sit under the IT team. And they've got their own jobs to do as well. This is something else for people to have to factor into their day, which we really appreciate because we're immersed in this. This is our job to know all of this stuff. But that must be quite a pressure for people to have to take that on board.
I mean, and often there's these, I suppose, the sexy use cases that come up, which is sort of like, solving the massive business problem, and then they're also like, and we love talking about those. I mean, I love talking about those as well. Where's the balance between, I suppose, focusing on that, which gets the headlines, versus focusing maybe on the little more mundane elements, like, I don't know, data cleansing or moving data from one particular system to another? How do we sort of make that balance, and where do you think the kind of the benefit is? I mean, are we spending too much time talking about the hype and not enough time talking about the mundane stuff, which is not as exciting to look at, maybe a little bit?
yeah, I think it's a really good point, Chris, and I think it's what we're certainly seeing, that this is a cultural shift in organisations more than anything else. And when you actually go into the organisation and start speaking to domain experts, the people that are wondering how this is going to impact work and their roles, the things that they want to apply AI to are the mundane, are the everyday, are the use cases that sit inside internal existing operational workflows that do, the grunt work that helps free them up to do their best work. And actually, when you go and ask the teams and the culture in the organisation, that's actually where everybody wants to apply it today. It's not a headline grabber, it's not super sexy, but the great thing about those use cases is they tend to be high value. So you can usually look at bottom line, top line impact from a return on investment because you're saving time or you're improving capacity that can allow for throughput. So you can often put a number on it because you're dealing with existing activity that has already got a certain cadence and a certain resource applied to it. So you can put numbers to it, but also it tends to be internal, which tends to be lower risk because you're not dealing with external stakeholders and external data. So it tends to be lower risk, higher value, measurable, and actually the people want that to be the first place to start. So that's what we find is the reality when we go in and start exploring use cases. Those operational productivity inside existing workflows is where we've got really kind of real traction happening and ability to do that fast. Yeah.
And in terms of like quantifying things like return on investment and those kind of things, I mean, that's just the usual process kind of applies for that, which is, I'm going to use this, it's going to save me X amount of times, therefore that's what the return on investment is.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you ask people the direct question to quantify what that might save them. They can usually tell you that very quickly, especially if you're talking to the operational execs, the people that are actually doing the work. When we think about the application of AI as a technology and it sits within technical teams, they're often not close enough to the domain to be able to really understand the best value placement of this technology. So what we do is we bring the domain experts into the room that are going to have their work impacted by the application of AI, tell us where that value would be best placed, and they will very quickly tell you how many hours or what the benefit would be to whoever their stakeholder group is, internal or external customer. So it's really important that this is not just sat with technical teams to deploy, that you're bringing in the organisation. And actually, it's such a dynamic and fast-moving place. Operational teams want to be involved in this conversation. They want to be part of it because they feel it acutely more than ever before. Technology potentially impacting their job in a very small amount of time, short amount of time, and they want to be involved in the conversation around that. And if they don't feel they're involved, it can be culturally, difficult.
And I wanted to chat a little bit about agents, and I suppose, and particularly AI agents, which that was the hot topic, particularly at the end of last year. And I kind of think of that a little bit similar to RPA to a certain extent, except AI kind of gives us extra capability to be able to access different data types, maybe audio types, maybe different types of screen types. It just sort of opens that up. I mean, is that the right way to think about it? Because that does allow you to add a lot more sort of process automation, and that's quite tangible for people. It's something we already know.
Yeah, I guess it's an evolution, isn't it, that we've gone through from RPA, and there's still also a lot of confusion around, maybe not confusion, but again misconception of what's automation and what's agentic AI. They're similar but also very different, if that makes sense. And I guess businesses are now thinking about automation when they actually weren't thinking about automation 5 years ago, but they probably should have been because of this so much news and talk around agentic AI. A good way to think about it as one sort of the workflows is like really intelligent automation. But also, there's a lot of different types of ways that these things are built. You've got fully agentic systems, and you've got workflows, and you've got automation. So once you start to open that up, it becomes quite complex.
So if I'm sitting in a business, how do I start thinking about, look, this is the extra capability that gets me? I mean, we all remember Excel macros as an example, or I mean, I'm old, so Lotus 123 macros on that side, that really date me. But we know about sort of like macros and sort of doing and improving automation that way. How do we think about this new capability in terms of like broadening that up? I mean, what's the mindset we need to get into in terms of like identifying opportunities? This could be applicable. This is a way of linking things together in a much more complex way we've ever done before to then get benefits. I mean, what's your kind of tips, I suppose?
I think there's an innovation journey to take non-technical people through when you're asking them to feed into the application of something like agentic AI, because it can feel conceptually quite complicated. Even RPA to some people, it feels like this is technical. I don't want to be. I don't think I can contribute. And the easiest way is to start with very simple use cases. And in the agentic world, an assistant is probably the first rung of the ladder. So people are used to work using chat, which is like Copilot or ChatGPT, where you're just having a conversation, but it waits for you to ask a question and it gives you a response. To assistants where you're giving it a job and it will go away and execute that job and do a number of tasks and come back when it's finished it. And then once people understand assistants and you apply use case to assistants, you can start to look at agents, and they can be semi-autonomous or fully autonomous. So think of it as a bit like a sort of progression of getting more automated and more intelligent and more autonomous, but you don't have to start up there where maybe it is more complicated. So our job is to help people see that you can apply assistants, very simple assistants, and simple agents, which could require sort of human triggering, prompting, triaging, as in completely in the loop, not fully autonomous. When you get them working with those types of agents and assistants, they understand very quickly how that can evolve to something more complicated. So what we look for is the low risk, high value use cases where things like assistants and semi-autonomous agents can be built with those domain experts together. So we teach them the skills and we show them how to do it. And that really helps to build their confidence to move into the more complicated stuff. Yeah.
And I suppose it's having the awareness to then be able to say, actually, I could do this differently. So therefore, that then goes on the project plan. So, well, let's do an evaluation. Is that the low-hanging fruit we need to go after? And if you don't have that awareness, then you wouldn't even recognize, well, I couldn't do that before. I mean, this is new capability. I couldn't do that like 5 years ago. So therefore, I wouldn't even flag it.
Yeah, it's just an education gap again, really. Once you start to get people educated in what is an agent, what's an assistant, what are the type of use cases, naturally people then, it's like opening Pandora's box. People then just start to come out with so many of them once they see what's possible. even with a single assistant, I've seen 8 to 10 hours a week's worth of saving from just an assistant, not a full agent. So once people start thinking in that way, it's.
And when you're chatting with people in firms, I mean, there's been a sort of a lot of concerns that got raised, particularly in the early days around, hallucinations got raised, but also, is this taking my job? All of those kind of things. I mean, how much do you still come across that? I mean, in terms of the conversations, how much fear is there?
Lots, and rightly so, because this is still, it's evolving so fast that even those of us that are in the sector working in it every day struggle to keep up. So it's no surprise that those that are entering this world feel that this is pretty overwhelming, and it's hard to get into it when there's so much language around this that feels, it's new, it's foreign to them. Even just agents and assistants and what's the difference. But we're talking about what is a prompt and guardrails, and people are talking about different types of tools, and it's a whole area of language that people need to learn. And I think, unsurprisingly, people shy away from that because it feels overwhelming. There's a lot of risk around job security for people. That's perceived risk. But we spend a lot of time talking about how you can use agents and assistants to augment what you do so you can do your best work, and helping with that cultural shift and thinking, because every single technology wave that there's been, it just changes the way we work. It doesn't necessarily replace the workforce. It's just that organisations have to adapt their team to that new way of working and help them to upskill. And that is the challenge, and always has been the challenge for every digital, technology wave, and helping people to be reassured that that's normal and it's happened before, and forever will it be that the way, is part of what we need to do with those of us in the industry, helping them to see what maybe their future of work looks like.
I mean, it strikes me there's going to be a whole set of new jobs. For example, we mentioned prompt engineering there as well. I mean, that was one that was talked about for a while, but it's just designing things so they actually work, and having expertise around that all needs to be developed. And that's a whole new suite of skills that people are going to kind of need to build up.
Yeah, exactly. There's a huge amount of opportunity that's going to come out of this, and I think the innovation part and the opportunity part of the return on investment. So you talk about efficiency savings and productivity. The element that's not really getting talked about as much at the moment is what opportunities is that going to create if we are able to make all of these savings and productivity savings over here. It's going to allow people to do more of their best work. It's going to give businesses opportunities to do things that they hadn't thought possible until now, and it's starting to get their mindset going with things, which it doesn't have to be a prompt engineering job that's going to come out of it, because it could be something completely new that we don't know, and it might not be related to AI in any way whatsoever, and it'll come out of that business through the ability of them being able to free up some more time.
Yeah, and I suppose with all of these technologies they come through, often, I mean, a lot of businesses, we tend to like having, quick fixes to be able to fix a process that's broken. It's a bad process that was broken. It's going to take the data from this particular process over here, this legacy system over here, and populate it here. I mean, we love that, because it gets me through the year, gets me through year end, and I can sort of make a saving. How do we make sure that with these kind of processes or sticking plasters that we put on, we don't lose sight of the fact that sometimes you just need to redesign your processes and have proper APIs, have proper interfaces, those kind of things, and making sure it doesn't become a sort of a band-aid or a sticking plaster for what is still a bad process? I mean, is that a danger we've got to watch for? And how do we then coach businesses to make sure that they do look at that overall kind of business kind of design, I suppose, to a certain extent?
I mean, it's a really, really good point, Chris. It is definitely going to bump up against, Charlie's our COO here at Zygens, and we are constantly thinking about how we operationalize what we do, and look at that and sit back at the whole customer journey and challenge ourselves on whether we're over engineering. Sometimes we over agentify what we do, and that can happen when you get over enthusiastic individuals or teams that really lean in and maybe create too many agents, which could actually be done by replacing a system. And so I think there's a real value in that point, and I think we have to watch carefully how this evolves over the next few years, and who the custodians are of those decisions. In our example, we tend to go in and very early on help create a kind of AI governance council of domain experts that sit in those workflows, the non-technical, so that they're bringing back, if this is working and not working, is it, have we just put a plaster over a problem that actually has just bumped the problem up or down the process, right? Because sometimes that's what it does. So, I think making sure you've got people that are constantly reviewing the application of these agents in that kind of frontline environment and feeding back and evaluating the impact of those, whether it's working well, whether it's actually creating other issues, is part of what will enable us to have that visibility. So I'd say governance is key to this, not just a strategy, but the people that are involved in informing how we do that. Yeah.
And talking of governance, so things like having AI policy and sort of like reporting around that, looking around things like, there's a whole thing around, is it prompt injection as an example, which is a fraud elements and those sort of things that kind of come through. Has that caught up yet? Because sometimes we get so excited about technology and that the governance piece, or certainly the regulation piece, takes a while to come through. It feels like that's going to be increasingly a conversation around making sure this stuff is governed, making sure you do have proper security in place, all of that sort of being talked about in the background. And we've got to kind of work on that. It feels like that's potential upcoming gap for a lot of firms.
I think most technology cycles, again, the policy and the regulation follows after, because it just moves too fast and these institutions just not ready. So I think, again, that's a common problem that a lot of businesses are used to kind of dealing with. And we've got quite good, I would say, in larger organisation structures now, where you've probably got a chief information security officer now, you've probably got somebody that is, a CTO or a head of innovation or transformation, where they'll probably be given this job of putting some governance around this, similar to the governance they've got for simply buying in technology products, right? Whereas if you'd have asked me 15 years ago, when there was no maturity around software adoption, where everyone would buy one ERP system to do the job, and now most companies have, I think there was the start 120 SaaS platforms the average SME has now. I think there is a sort of governance framework organisations can sort of slot this into, or teams that should be able to pick it up.
But I suppose the balance there is sometimes you see governance or controls being used as a reason not to try something, right, as well. So it's like some firms haven't gone down there because they're so afraid of hallucinations, or they're so afraid of, trying something. And sometimes it's rightly so, but sometimes that can almost like constrain any kind of adoption. How do we sort of like get that balance in terms of making sure we're not putting the business at risk, but then also making sure that we are developing the knowledge that's going to keep us ready for the future?
Do you want to take that, Charlie, or do you want me to answer it?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's going to force the pressure of the market pressures, and just the nature of this new wave of technology is going to force people to lean into it. I think that's probably my thoughts on that particular point. If they're nervous about it, learn about it and just really throw yourself into this, because there will be a way, and it's not as scary as what people think when you start to go into detail about it. And we do see those light bulb moments come on where people are, okay, so we can actually start somewhere without it being a huge risk to the business.
And we are working with some, NASDAQ listed companies, really huge corporates, and they're more agile than we give them credit for, frankly. And I think they've had 20, 30 years of digital innovation and adoption and cycles of transformation and change management programs now, where they've got a bit of maturity around, okay, this is the new thing, and taking it through a cycle. It's just happening very fast. So they're rightly, I think, cautious. But what we're seeing is, sandbox, proof of concept, MVP type environments, testing out some use cases, doing it with a pilot group before, and that sort of, I'd call, startup, agile MVP culture is now much more in the enterprise than it ever has been. And I think that will help AI to kind of find its place in the organisation. But I think what the technical teams that sort of own the controls around data governance, the CIS, the chief information security officers, the data protection officers, those people, the compliance teams are there. What they often struggle with doing is getting to the front line and helping to work out, helping the business work out where to apply this. And that is the gap. We usually find that when we bring those use cases back that are scored on risk, value, complexity, that have a lot of information for them to look at and determine whether that reaches any or is a level of risk they're not prepared to take. With that information, they can do something with it. And that's what our job is, to really help those organisations do, is to give those existing teams something that they can make a decision on. Really.
I just find it very reassuring that some of the decision mechanisms and some of the measures we've used for many years don't really change. It's just a new tool that we can put through the same kind of frameworks, right? Which kind of helps us. I mean, the whole frame, the whole sort of field is sort of like changing so much. Even since we first spoke and we were chatting about open clause, that was the hot topic of the time. I mean, like, talk about these techniques that come up, and it's kind of interesting how psychology changes. I remember when Microsoft Copilot came out, and they said, "Well, we're going to let Copilot take complete control of your computer, and it's going to be doing all sorts of things." And like, everyone was up in arms, like, "We're not going to let them do that." And yet, that's exactly what we're being proposed by, is it co-work, or being proposed by open clause? Well, it's almost like, do you think our psychology is kind of changing? We're kind of getting used to these ideas. I mean, because it's developing. I mean, these are like mini agents that are sort of able to do like all sorts of capability. I don't know. It's developing fast. It feels like.
It's the future. It's the future. There's the likes of OpenClaw, isn't it? I think that's definitely where it's heading. Hence why OpenAI, NVIDIA, obviously Anthropic have already, they're probably the first to market in terms of getting close to it with co-work. Now partnering up with Microsoft, they're hopefully going to bring out their version of that by the end of this month, which that, speaks volumes, doesn't it? If Microsoft are going into that sort of world. How exciting is it though for, humans to be able to have that sort of, ability to be able to send a message to your agent and get it to go off and do your thing securely, because it will be possible to get to that point.
I mean, it does strike me that it's important around being first, right? So, I mean, that's that first mover advantage. So with AI agents, it's quite easy to replicate something you've seen elsewhere. I mean, you can either from a software design point of view or from a process point of view, or those kind of things. How important is it that we stay ahead on some of the technology and sort of be, I suppose, you don't want to be sort of like super leading edge where it costs you a lot of money, but you just want to be almost like that fast follower so you can develop some of those things. I mean, how important is that? Because the barrier to replicating ideas seems like that's going down as a result of AI development, but the ideas themselves is something innately human that we can stay ahead with.
I think the tools have become so easy for anybody to get hold of if you can help them to understand, what to use them for, that it's just about good ideas. And I think that the real you're right. If somebody else has done something, you can probably pick a skill off the shelf, which is just a way to do something. Somebody's already kind of written the rule book of how to do that thing, so you don't have to. Or there'll be agents that people are publishing and building that are already doing 80% of the tasks that you've identified needs to be done. So it's just coming up with the ideas that's important now. And I don't think first mover is about the technology. It's about understanding the problems you want to solve with it, because there are hundreds and thousands of these things that are open source, free. You can download them, deploy them without having a massive technical team, right? And you can do that securely inside your own infrastructure. If you're an organization, you can run these models within your own walled garden of security, so that you're not giving your data to the external models. But you can pluck these things off the shelf and run them, small models, large models, and give your team the capability. So actually you're looking for the ideas and then go out and find what you can bring in securely and deploy into your environment. And therefore it's the first mover bit is be first to work out where you want to apply this. That's the bit that feels like the first mover, is identify the right problems to fix at the highest value, the lowest risk, that you can get people to deliver on rapidly.
And I suppose if you were to give your advice, I suppose, into like where to best focus or where to best start, what do you think is the top three, and where do you think it's going to be moving? I suppose, particularly looking ahead in the next sort of like 6 months. I'm going to say usually I say 3 years, but I'm going to say 6 months because it's AI. Where should we focus, and what are the 3 or 4 things you think people are really worth looking at?
So we're just about to publish our first report, our first year of like building roadmaps of agents of financial services, because it's so new. Well, I can't believe we're sort of publishing our first report in the first year. There's nearly 400 agents that we have designed across financial services. And, without question, the number one area is that access to knowledge. And what I mean by that is organisation knowledge, that people are kind of constantly answering the same question over and over again to internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, and making that kind of knowledge assistant available to whichever stakeholder group is constantly needing to get those answers, whether you're onboarding new starters, whether it's for clients, whether it's for suppliers, whether it's for teams that are interacting with each other. And it's such a easy use case for people to build within their teams and deploy within your environment, that feels like when you talk about data, this is almost like it's unstructured information that often exists either in people's heads or on documents all over the place that people can't get their hands on. So it's such a really easy use case that any team can build out and create their own kind of knowledge assistant for their team within their organisation. The second area that we're seeing a huge amount in is compliance. And this is just making sure that we're checking against the standards or the regulatory standards for that organisation. And again, it's internal, it's not external. It is just having that process being something that everyone in the organisation can interact with, and one person being a bottleneck, enabling that person to be able to spend more time, being in the market, understanding the market, as opposed to just serving internal needs. So certainly compliance is another area that we find there's a lot of use cases around. But to be honest with you, the one advice we would give everybody thinking about this is just start by involving a group of people across your organisation in a conversation around where the opportunities exist, because they will tell you very quickly. And if you can curate that and start to look at how you pull solutions that are already existing into your organisation, you'll probably start that innovation culture and more will follow. Does that make sense? Getting started. It's like anything, it's just get started.
Playing around with things maybe at home, and then sort of like saying, well, can we do this? And then before you overlay it, almost like an enterprise kind of, overlay on it to make sure it's secure and those kind of things.
Yeah, just get started with some simple things. Yeah. Sorry, Charlie.
Don't be afraid. Yeah, just don't be afraid of it. That's all I was going to say. Yeah, just get started. Don't be afraid of it. Stop worrying about what the competition are doing, and just get on with it yourselves. And don't be afraid to experiment with the tools, at home. It's the best way of learning what's possible.
Well, Charlie and Zandra, thanks very much for making the time. I mean, this is just like a massively growing area, so you can see you guys are right at the forefront of it. So I really appreciate making the time and sort of explaining a few things, at least for me, around where we got to look and how to sort of particularly operationalize some of this in businesses. I think it's super important, and we're definitely in that sort of like implementation phase now, rather than just the ideas piece in terms of the hype. So I think that makes a huge difference. So thanks very much.
Thanks,
thank you. Cheers, Chris. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.